How easy it would be to fall for you. But that, of course, is something I won't.
In the cutthroat world of video games, bad business can be just as deadly as bad design. What if I told you that the same person canceled Fallout 3 and Baldur's Gate 3 in the same year? You'd probably think I got my companies and years mixed up, but if true, it had to be one of the biggest blunders in video game business history. So was the chaos and uncertainty of Interplay's later days. In their prime, they were at the helm of legendary franchises like Fallout, Dungeons & Dragons, and Star Trek, even filming the original cast while they were still with us. Interplay was such a key video game figure in the 90s. They published the first titles by future heavyweights like BioWare, Blizzard Entertainment, and Treyarch. Decades on, the original creators left the company, and Interplay's an empty shell of the industry giant they once were. In the late 90s, a foreign publisher acquired them and terminated nearly a dozen games. Then they auctioned Interplay's intellectual property to the highest bidder, of which they had no part in creating. So what happened? How could one of the top game publishers in the world fall apart in just a couple years? And is there truth to the claim that Fallout was a B-tier, forgotten game that was dredged from obscurity and saved by Bethesda? This video aims to provide context and to correct the revisionism that plagues modern discourse about the Fallout franchise. While these arguments are based on interviews, press releases, court cases, design documents, and the games themselves, it's coming from a place that finds the erasure of the great works from developers in Interplay's prime more than a little insulting. These games have massive fan bases who still enjoy their creations today, whether or not they know who made them. So let's dig into the reasons bad business killed the Fallout franchise, not the game's design, and why Fallout wasn't so much saved, it was sold out. Fallout 1 and 2 were successful games. That may seem like a controversial statement in today's revisionist history, where the notion that Bethesda made the Fallout series popular is accepted at face value as fact. But there is a long history in the soil beneath this rebooted franchise's roots. The game has seen releases on PC, console, and mobile, tens of thousands of community mods, and over 50 million sales culminating in Fallout becoming a household name thanks to Amazon's television show. The trailer states in bold lettering, from the acclaimed video game creator Todd Howard. But Howard, for all his successes and experience, invented very little of this franchise. Most everything people know and love about Fallout didn't start in 2018 with Fallout 76, nor in 2008 with Fallout 3. The Pip-Boy, the Brotherhood of Steel, the Enclave, New California Republic, Super Mutants, Dogmeat, Ghouls, Rad Scorpions, Deathclaws, the Retrofuture aesthetic, Power Armor, Robobrains, Vault Boy, Vault-Tec, Nuka-Cola, The Overseer, Vault Suits, Raiders, Shady Sands, Mr. Handy, and of course,
War. War never changes.
These were all featured in Fallout games in 1997 and 98. 10 years before Bethesda even released their first game in the series. Sales figures aren't nearly as public as they are today, with digital storefronts and online reporting. However, according to insiders, the original Fallout games sold very well. In 2017, former Interplay CEO Brian Fargo stated Fallout sold 600,000 copies. And around that time, ex-Black Isle Studios head Fergus Urquhart claimed that Interplay had to pay additional music royalties because Fallout shipped over 800,000 copies. Considering its relatively small budget of just $3 million, regional pricing and sales aside, this was an incredible return on investment of about 10 to 1. Skyrim cost $100 million to make, so a game the size of Fallout 3, released on the same platforms just 3 years earlier, easily cost tens of millions to make. Fallout 3 sold about 12 million copies, blowing away the numbers of the Interplay games, but easily cost over 10 times as much to make. So while it was a much bigger payoff, it was a significantly greater investment too. Simply put, there was way more money, advertising, and manpower poured into the later Fallout games. Fallout 3 trailers and ads were pushed across both the internet and on the streets, while Fallout 1 had just a few modest magazine ads, and its dev team could fit into a cozy meeting room. But if you read just about any social media post, forum, or gamer's opinion, they'll tell you it was Bethesda Game Studios that made Fallout popular and successful. So what really happened? Let's dive back into the 90s and trace the steps that made Fallout brilliant, and the missteps that led Interplay to bankruptcy, eventually pawning off the franchise in its death throes.
Fallout is one of the best role-playing games to be released in several years, and it succeeds in entertaining gamers by providing a fresh and compelling storyline, good graphics and sound, and attention to those little details that can transform a good game into a great one.
Fallout started in early 1994 as a one-man show. Producer and programmer Tim Cain worked on a new RPG before he had a firm grasp of a story or setting, in between his work on Stonekeep and tools for other projects. At first, Interplay CEO Brian Fargo wasn't confident about the project and told Tim he wasn't allowed to take people off of their assignments. Instead, Tim had to lure volunteers to discuss the game after office hours, with the promise of 6 o'clock pizza. Cain's love of tabletop systems, and especially GURPS, or Generic Universal Role-Playing System, led him to code tools in his free time to help run his pen and paper game sessions. This inspired him to reach out to Steve Jackson Games in order to license GURPS for a new computer RPG he wanted to make. It went through several iterations: a time travel game with dinosaurs, an alien invasion, and even a fantasy RPG, eventually landing on a post-apocalyptic setting, codenamed Vault 13. It's in these early meetings that Cain connected with team members like Leonard Boyarsky, Jason Taylor, and Jason Anderson, who would provide a lot of the core concepts, such as using fallout shelters to introduce the character to the setting as a fish out of water, and the retro-futurist aesthetic, where robots and fusion cores exist, but in the fashion and culture the 1950s imagined. Eventually, Brian Fargo agreed to assign more people to the team, including lead designer Chris Taylor, who designed much of the system work due to his experience with RPGs. Tabletop RPGs were one of Fallout's biggest inspirations and its biggest problems. Deathclaws were based on an unused Turask model, made for one of Interplay's D&D games. Advantages and disadvantages in GURPS inspired the perk system, and as a testament to their pen and paper origins, Fallout 1 and 2 still have a print button on their character sheets. When Interplay became an official licensor of the Dungeons & Dragons franchise, Brian Fargo nearly canceled the project, because at the time, official D&D titles were considered a safer bet. They practically printed money. But Cain's team weren't interested in fantasy or D&D, successfully arguing that a post-apocalyptic RPG wouldn't cannibalize Interplay's D&D lineup. This was a preview to the craziness and hoops the team had to jump through just to get the first game out the door. But this tabletop influence resulted in a randomization-heavy game, with less than stellar controls, par for the course at the time.
The iconic mouse drive interface makes navigation and combat a breeze, though it's worth taking a peek at the manual too. Conversations come to life through eerily realistic facial animations, and the main graphics shine with detail, while expressive dialogue and other crisp audio elements complete the post-apocalyptic scene. Interplay set out to create a real role-playing game for the PC, and it's more than succeeded. Even mild fans of RPGs will find Fallout easy to fall into.
GURPS creator Steve Jackson took issue with many creative choices in Fallout, notably the Vault Boy illustrations and the violent execution in the game's intro. After a heated meeting with Steve Jackson in person, Interplay cut ties with GURPS, but thanks to some clever modular programming and designer Chris Taylor's homebrew RPG system, the team replaced GURPS with what is now called the Special System in mere days, saving the project once again. Development progressed steadily, but continued to miss deadlines, originally intending to release in 1996. But when Diablo blew up in popularity in 1997, Interplay stakeholders repeatedly suggested that Fallout should convert to real-time combat with multiplayer. They were months out from launch at this point. Taking clever advice from his colleague, instead of fighting it, Tim rolled with the punches and detailed the sizable budget and delays required to make such changes. He didn't hear about it again after that. In April 1997, the team were tasked with releasing a modified version of Junktown as a demo, which got downloaded tens of thousands of times. Another early sign that they might have a hit on their hands was that the QA team, unusually, would come in on weekends to playtest Fallout, unpaid. They were enjoying it enough to want to finish another run before the new build released, erasing their save games. But not everything was perfect. The game lacked quality of life features, time limits on the main quest were divisive, even among Interplay staff, and were patched out after launch, and the bugs that snuck through testing made Fallout an uneven adventure.
Don't mistake these glitches for big problems, however. Fallout is easily the best role-playing game released in the past year, and maybe longer. It's a game that clearly was a labor of love for the design team, with humor, style, and brains to spare, and with a wonderfully refreshing emphasis on character development and decision-making. For role players, it's a must-have, but anyone with even passing interest in the genre should check it out as well.
Further solidifying the tone and aesthetic that would be reflected in future games, the team scoured classic music albums for their intro song. Their first pick was I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire, but the label demanded a ludicrous amount of money to license the song, in the six-figure range. Instead, Interplay settled with another, less expensive track called Maybe, and so the famous television screen intro was born, panning out to the echoes of the past, the radiated corpse of America, serenaded by the nostalgic but haunting words, Maybe you'll think of me when you are all alone.
Maybe, 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 maybe.
While we're now treated to a sea of blogs, journos, and YouTube channels crowning games with dozens of Game of the Year awards, we didn't have nearly that many outlets in the 90s. Internet coverage was still in its infancy, and magazines were expensive to print. Nevertheless, Fallout was showered with praise, especially as time went on. Fallout snagged the Best RPG of the Year from GameSpot and Computer Games Online, and was nominated for DICE Awards. At one point, PC Gamer listed it as number 13 out of the best 100 games of all time, right behind Half-Life, even beating out the likes of Baldur's Gate 2 and GTA Vice City. Many inducted Fallout into their respective halls of fame, such as IGN, Computer Gaming World, and GameSpy. The future looked bright for this new and refreshing franchise, but there was a slow-motion train wreck happening behind the scenes at Interplay that would ultimately doom Fallout and the company itself.
One of the things I saw happen at Interplay was that we were just stretched too thin. There were too many games in development. Before you have success, you have to be really lean and mean and focused on the one or two things that are going to make you successful. Once you become successful, now every door is open, and you have to have a different sort of discipline.
Interplay's tagline was, by gamers, for gamers. Employees loved their work and reserved conference rooms after hours to play games. Team members would invite people over to play LAN games of Warcraft, and poker nights were common. It was a fun, creative, and energetic atmosphere in its prime. One of Interplay's greatest successes was the decision to publish fledgling studio BioWare's first games. First, a mecha shooter called Shattered Steel. Then Fergus Urquhart, head of the RPG division, suggested that BioWare repurpose their RTS engine into a Dungeons & Dragons game. This of course led to the legendary Baldur's Gate. Co-founder and CEO Brian Fargo helped build the company from the ground up starting in the 80s as a developer, but they experienced growing pains while transforming into an international publisher with subsidiaries, high-profile tabletop game, TV and movie licenses, and even an office in Japan.
He was very willing to take big bets, probably bigger bets than I would have taken. He could only do so much and work so many hours. That's how it got ahead of him. There were more products and more products and more products.
In the middle of Fallout's development, the team moved to work under Dragonplay, the D&D and RPG division of Interplay. But after Fallout released, Brian Fargo asked division director Fergus Urquhart to give it an official name that represents the breadth of games they would make, not just D&D titles. As a Scotsman by blood, Fergus chose Black Isle Studios, a reference to his ancestors' homeland. And so, one of the most legendary RPG developers was born. Fallout 2's production began with a new team, even before the first game had finished. But once Fallout released, Brian Fargo wasn't thrilled with the sequel's design work that had been done thus far, so Tim Cain and the core Fallout team were ordered to start full-time on Fallout 2. Already tired after a 3-year development, when told they needed to put out a sequel in just 1 year, it ate at the crew's morale. Then after having bonuses cut, and Tim Cain's creative authority overridden by departmental conflict and cross orders, he had had enough. After finishing a story outline and several scenarios, Tim Cain, Jason Anderson, and Leonard Boyarsky left Interplay and founded Troika Games. This was the studio that would go on to craft cult classics like Arcanum, Temple of Elemental Evil, and Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines. Back at Interplay, a new team led by Chris Avallone started on Fallout 2. But this time around, development was a lot more splintered, having individual groups of 2 to 3 people working on different areas separately, with only a couple quests added later, linking between them.
There was more people working with less supervision, if that was possible, on Fallout 2, and trying to make a bigger game in a shorter period of time, which of course it sounds like saying it that way, like, well, that's stupid, right? But
Fallout 2 offered a much larger game world, with more of California and Nevada to explore, and more quests to tackle. Debuting here is the series' first drivable car, through fast travel at least, with storage in the trunk, and some now classic additions to Fallout Canyon, such as the enigmatic and formidable Enclave. The game's scrambled production, new designers and writers, and quick turnaround led to some problems, however. The game has a less consistent tone and more pop culture references, and Brian Fargo's insistence on a holiday release and a more accessible sequel led to a mandatory tutorial section and a fair share of bugs. While many prefer Fallout 2 over the original due to its greater sense of freedom and scope, by most estimations, it sold about half as many copies. Meanwhile, Interplay continued to ping-pong between brilliance and bankruptcy. They launched VR Sports, even though it wasn't actually virtual reality, to compete with the growing dominance of EA Sports, but heavily invested in the doomed Sega Saturn console. They also put a lot of time and money into a failed online multiplayer platform called Engage. Another attempt at breaking into multiplayer was a late 90s pitch by Fargo, making Fallout into an MMO. But Fergus Urquhart talked Brian Fargo out of that idea, since he identified the immense expense and time needed to build such a game, in the 100 million range. Then there were pet projects, such as the Fever Dream point-and-click adventure of Light and Darkness. Though missed in its sequel, Riven, sold like hotcakes, its many clones struggled to see those kinds of numbers. And the adult themes and tasteful nudity on its cover art turned off family-oriented stores from putting the game on shelves. Interplay's early Star Trek games, Star Trek 25th Anniversary and Judgment Rights, were well-received adventure titles. However, their later efforts like Starfleet Academy, which used green screen footage of the original Star Trek cast as instructors, weren't usable. In a panic, they pulled other Interplay teams in to painstakingly repair the footage frame by frame, as reshoots weren't an option. Famously, Star Trek Secret of Vulcan Fury aimed to push boundaries with a digitized likeness of Spock, Kirk, and Bones in a staggering 5+ hours of CGI cutscenes. Marketing poured money into magazine ads, trailers, and even cereal boxes for Vulcan Fury, while 2 years of production delays led to its cancellation in 1999.
I should have stayed more focused. That's the only thing I regret the most. It was just too much. I should have just stayed with our core audience.
In desperation to save his floundering company, Brian Fargo put Interplay up for a public offering in 1998 to get the funding they needed to stay afloat. Putting yourself on the stock market while unstable or in debt is never a good idea, but the influx of money helped Interplay for a while. Interplay's D&D license proved to be an expensive burden and a blessing. Blood and Magic was a real-time strategy game that put you in charge of creatures right out of the monster manual. And Descent to Undermountain promised much, but proved underwhelming. Neither sold very well. However, 1998 saw the release of Baldur's Gate, which raised the bar for Dungeons & Dragons games forever. This was co-developed by BioWare and Black Isle Studios, setting the course and expectation for these studios for years to come. And along with its sequel and revered expansion packs, sold over 3.5 million copies.
For me, I've always considered Baldur's Gate and BioWare's Infinity Engine as the reason we kept Black Isle running as long as we did. Even today, few teams have the resources to make a Baldur's Gate. It required a lot of developers, a lot of QA, and a lot of support beyond BioWare in terms of audio, VO, and some production. In addition, because the work was being done in Edmonton, BioWare was able to hire a much larger team than any American team for a fraction of the cost. And if they had a problem, they could hire developers to brute force solutions where companies living in higher cost of living sections of the world could not.
This success led Interplay to license BioWare's Infinity Engine, greenlighting several other D&D games in the same style. Planescape Torment carved its niche with inspired writing by Chris Avallone, fresh off of completing Fallout 2, but this game was more of an atmospheric, moral fable than a feel-good fantasy romp. It sold significantly worse than Baldur's Gate or Fallout did at under 100,000 copies, despite its celebrated status even at the time. Josh Sawyer graduated from webmaster to designer on the Icewind Dale series, another D&D franchise in the template of Baldur's Gate. Reviews and sales favored these games, and along with Fallout, solidified Black Isle Studios as the premier role-playing game company. Financially, however, the magic of the Baldur's Gate formula was wearing off, and they saw diminishing returns in sales over the years.
So you had a game in development codenamed Van Buren in the early 2000s. Yes. It was the original Fallout 3 before we got the Bethesda version.
Actually, it was actually the second Fallout 3. Torment was still in development, and Fallout 2 was done, and we were now going to do a 3D, like now 3D was the cool stuff. We were moving forward, but we were still really learning, and Interplay it's kind of where Interplay started to kind of run into financial trouble, and that's where Icewind Dale came from. So the Fallout 3 team became the Icewind Dale team.
In their final couple of years as a publisher, Interplay was a roller coaster. For every Free Space 2, you had a Vulcan Fury. For every Earthworm Jim, there was a Boogerman. For each hit like Descent, there was a bomb like Descent to Undermountain. They were too spread out. Their brand no longer reflected a standard of quality, nor even a hint of what to expect inside the box. Brian Fargo started canceling games that were losing money, then coming down hard on teams that actually made successful launches, demanding they pump out a sequel in months. And in the end, their mantra of being a fun, productive studio that joked around on holidays and made the games they want to see was gone. It became less by gamers for gamers and more do by the holidays for profit. Interplay's trial by fire came to pass when Wall Street and investors dried up, as the infamous tech bubble would burst in the early 2000s.
Other publishers had that one product that blasted them through to the other side. With Take-Two, it was GTA. With THQ, it was wrestling. With Activision, it was Tony Hawk. You could pin it to one thing. We didn't have that one thing. The only one thing we had was Baldur's Gate, but the problem with Baldur's Gate was it was PC. You couldn't sell 5 million copies.
Then came Titus Interactive. Like Ubisoft, Titus was founded by French brothers in the mid-80s, developing their own games, publishing games overseas, then latching onto licensed properties to take advantage of brand value. Unlike Ubisoft, however, Titus didn't have nearly the pedigree, and is perhaps best known for botching Superman 64, a game so poor that they immediately lost the license to make ports or follow-ups. Their RoboCop game for the original Xbox wasn't much better.
These other guys took over. They're not bad guys, but they just did not have the vision.
Titus went on the French stock market in 1998, and soon started acquiring other studios like they were candy, such as Blue Sky Software, Digital Integration, and Virgin Interactive. They also purchased a minority share of Interplay, as it too was on the public market. But Titus's biggest acquisition was debt. The helping hand of Titus was welcome at first, but after a few months, they started getting more and more interested in Interplay, leading them to buying a controlling stake in the company. Brian Fargo then traded in his Interplay shares for Titus stock. As of July 1999, Hervé Kahn was on the board of directors, and his brother, Eric Kahn, became head of development. In 2001, Titus bought more stock and became a majority shareholder, with 51% of the shares under their name. Titus pulled this off through a $25 million deal by courting other shareholders, such as Universal Studios, to sell their stock at a premium of about $4 per share, nearly double their worth at the time. Many in the company, including Brian Fargo, saw this as a hostile takeover. Allegations spread that Interplay employees were actively trying to ruin the takeover before it could happen. Between a rock and a hard place, Fargo admitted in a newspaper article that he couldn't fight the games market and a 50% shareholder. In March 2001, Interplay published a tactical spin-off game, Fallout Tactics. Australian developer Microforte made a competent product and included a real-time combat mode to appeal to a wider audience. The game explored the previously uncharted, post-apocalyptic Midwest and Rocky Mountains areas. Tactics was also the first game in the series with multiplayer, and featured a variety of different fighters to control, like ghouls, robots, dogs, super mutants, and even deathclaws. But it didn't appeal as much to the RPG crowd, and lacked the series' trademark exploration, choice, and consequence. It was, however, a quality tactical strategy game, and sold a respectable 300,000 copies, warranting a sequel. Fallout Tactics 2's story would have revolved around a Garden of Eden creation kit corrupted by radiation, terraforming the flora and fauna, creating monstrous plant life that consumed the life of the wasteland. But due to mismanagement or lack of confidence or direction, the sequel was cancelled later that same year.
I'm also pretty disappointed that Tactics 2 never saw the light of day, since it's a title that would have benefited from the experience and criticisms of the first game. I was also lucky enough to have the original docs for Fallout on hand. And so between the original vision and a collective perception of that vision, once realised it painted a pretty clear picture.
In late 2001, BioWare severed ties with Interplay as a publisher, alleging contract breaches and unpaid royalties. This left BioWare's upcoming project, Neverwinter Nights, uncertain as they searched for a new publisher. By early 2002, the legal battles ended, with the rights to publish Neverwinter Nights transferring to a new company. French publisher Infogrames had just acquired Hasbro Interactive, which included the name brand they would switch to, Atari, as well as the rights to the Dungeons & Dragons license via Wizards of the Coast. This meant that not only did Interplay lose their most successful external developer, but were now on shaky ground in terms of retaining rights to the Baldur's Gate franchise. Infogrames sold a multi-year, multi-title license to Interplay for Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale specifically, but they could not create new IPs under the Dungeons & Dragons banner. This led to Interplay skirting that decision by developing a new D&D game without BioWare's involvement and calling it Baldur's Gate 3, despite it not being connected to the other two.
One thing that I had noticed in Fallout 1 and 2 that I wanted to address in Baldur's Gate 3, the Black Hound, as well as Van Buren, was that sort of, I kiss a baby and then I punch an old lady in the face. And the result is that no one has an opinion on me.
Interplay's money problems continued, and things were looking grim, even with Titus Interactive's investment into the company. As the Cain brothers took more proactive leadership roles at Interplay, Brian Fargo's decisions would often get shot down or undermined, making him feel like a CEO in name only. The straw that broke the camel's back was when Fargo had a deal with a Hong Kong investor that he thought would turn the company around, but the Cains told him to renegotiate and that the deal wasn't good enough, so he quit. Hervé Cain soon took over the company as CEO. Interplay soldiered on and continued to make inroads into the growing console market, with games like MDK and Hunter the Reckoning. Good games in their own right, but they didn't catch on with the masses. Another casualty in the desperate scramble to take on the console market, Fallout Extreme was a short-lived project that aimed to be a 3D extension of the team-based tactics of Fallout Tactics, but played from third and first-person perspectives, with stealth gameplay, sniping, objectives like disarming bombs, switching between characters, and achieving objectives through tactical teamwork. It would have played something like Commandos meets Tom Clancy. Fallout Extreme was planned to launch on Xbox, and set to introduce new factions like the Issaquah Braves, Chinese warlords, Werebeast riding Huns, and the Imperial Guardsmen. It was canned before full production could start. During this turmoil, Interplay lost the rights to Star Trek, and in desperation sold Shiny Entertainment, creator of MDK and Earthworm Jim, to Infogrames for $47 million. Shiny was in the middle of developing Enter the Matrix, which ironically ended up being their most successful game at 5 million copies sold. After an attempt to port Baldur's Gate to the PlayStation proved too cumbersome, Interplay canceled it. Their first console hit was the beloved Dark Alliance in 2001, developed by Snowblind Studios as a simplified and action-focused interpretation of the Baldur's Gate franchise. However, Interplay got into hot water when they used Snowblind's proprietary engine without their permission and developed Dark Alliance 2 in-house, leading to an ugly court battle and eventually the cancellation of a planned Dark Alliance 3. But the two games that Black Isle Studios knew would bring the studio into the black again were Fallout 3 and Baldur's Gate 3, both of which were in and out of development since their last entries were released. Led by Josh Sawyer after his work on the Icewind Dale games, Baldur's Gate 3: The Black Hound was a completely new story, unrelated to the first two games. It was really more of an Icewind Dale sequel. In fact, it was set in the Dale Lands, not the Sword Coast, home of the city Baldur's Gate, from which the series is named. They built a new, proprietary 3D engine for the game, as an answer to contemporary RPGs such as Neverwinter Nights. It was a more cerebral tale about the eponymous Black Hound, a mysterious creature who haunted those who carried profound guilt. Along with this title were plans to launch a full trilogy, with save games carried through each sequel. The Black Hound beautifully realized a region of the Forgotten Realms, unexplored by video games at the time, and treasured choice and consequence above all else. And thus, it was a risky departure from the Ball-Spawn saga of the previous Baldur's Gate games. Things were going well, and the game was about 75% done when word came in that Interplay lost the rights to publish another Baldur's Gate game for the PC. The incident was blamed on an accounting error.
Interplay lost the D&D license. And ultimately they lost it because there was a bunch of unpaid royalties and there was some arguments with some developers and things like that. And unfortunately at the time we were making Baldur's Gate 3. We'd built a whole new engine and we were making Baldur's Gate 3 and it looked amazing. And then by the early 2003, Brian had now been gone for a while and I couldn't get computers approved. I mean, it was just, we were working on, even though we were still bringing in all the revenue, like Black Isle, we weren't getting anything. And so it was actually early 2003 and I left. I just decided, okay, I'm done. And then by August, we had signed up Knights Republic 2. And then right as we were signing up Knights Republic 2, that is when then Interplay started shutting down Black Isle. And I would say probably by the end of 2003, we probably had about 25 people, of which 23 of them were from Black Isle.
Due to Interplay failing to renew its D&D license, a frustrated Fergus suggested to Hervé Khan that he should sell Black Isle Studios, claiming that the experienced RPG developers could be worth as much as $20 million to the right bidder. Hervé declined, saying he didn't think Black Isle Studios was worth anything. Between other projects, Chris Avallone designed Fallout 3, codenamed Van Buren, in what is probably the most cost-effective way possible, by writing and testing the modules in pen and paper format, before even touching the software side of things.
I was fortunate enough to have the chance to GM Fallout Van Buren back at Black Isle, even though there were barely any team members assigned to the project. Running pen and paper games after work is a great way to flesh out the world, the lore, and the mechanics, when all you have is yourself to fall back on as game designer and world builder.
Van Buren harnessed the engine custom-built for the now cancelled Baldur's Gate 3. It was going to follow the exploits of a prisoner who escapes his cell after an explosion sets the penitentiary free to roam the post-apocalyptic wasteland. There were refinements done to the special system, and a rich history and lore spanning decades of in-universe development, as well as striking new factions such as Caesar's Legion, famously recreated in Fallout New Vegas. There was the pagan female faction, the Daughters of Hecate, who enslaved the Vipers as their personal rovers to conquer the wastes. The Circle of Steel were a paranoid splinter group formed from former Brotherhood of Steel members. The Iron Rivers traveled a holy exodus on the path of a set of pre-war locomotive tracks. There were even designs for future fan favorites like Joshua Graham, all written by 2003 in this vast trove of fertile lore and quest design. Many classic Fallout ideas and mechanics were expanded on too. Certain triggers would activate the Pip-Boy's automated response system, unlocking new abilities and mechanics to the player over the course of the game.
Not long after Baldur's Gate 3 got cancelled due to a supposed accounting error which caused the studio to lose the D&D license, I resigned. It felt as if any more work we did on RPGs had the same chance of getting cancelled no matter how hard we worked on it. It
was especially difficult to resign as Baldur's Gate 3's loss meant we could switch gears and finally have a team working on Fallout Van Buren. And I had spent years putting together the design for it, but I felt that what happened to Baldur's Gate 3 would happen to Fallout Van Buren. And within a year after my departure, right before Christmas, Interplay canceled Van Buren as well. I felt bad for the team, but at the same time, the writing had been on the wall for some time. Josh Sawyer moved over to work on Van Buren after the Black Hound got canceled. And following popular trends, many features were force-fed to the Van Buren team, such as real-time combat and multiplayer functionality. But Sawyer, a CRPG and tabletop fan, focused on having an optional turn-based mode that still felt tactical and balanced. Interplay canceled Fallout Van Buren in late 2003 after releasing a playable demo internally. Though it was still rough in the presentation and gameplay department, it proved the Black Hound engine was serviceable, and Fallout's classic gameplay translated well into 3D. A common misconception is that Van Buren was nearly finished, ready for release. This wasn't the case. The design documents were both written and tested in pen and paper form, but the game still had at least another year in the oven before launch. After canceling several games and Black Isle's director quitting, Hervé Khan didn't see a future for the studio, so he shut them down and ceased all PC game development, going all in on console games. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel was Interplay's final attempt to convert a respected computer RPG into a simplified console counterpart. Using their previous success with Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance as a template and the same engine, the one they'd be sued over for using without permission, Interplay stitched together a team from various employees who worked on Descent, Hunter the Reckoning, Sacrifice, Giants, and other action-focused games. But few of them, if any, were Fallout veterans. Fallout's console gaming debut was a thick-headed, hornier, metal music-infused romp that had some fun and notable features, like being able to pick from predefined characters of many backgrounds, including a playable ghoul character. Yet too much was lost in the translation to real-time combat, and the story traded philosophy and world-building with F-bombs and electric guitar solos. Fallout has always been a dark and violent franchise, but it wasn't until Brotherhood of Steel came along that you could describe it as edgy. Quests essentially boiled down to go here and kill every enemy in this zone, and dialogue and RPG progression was simplified to almost being non-existent. These days, you can port a complicated PC game like Baldur's Gate 3 or Civilization 6 to consoles with almost no downsides. But in the PS2 era, console versions of franchises were glorified demos of their PC versions. Releasing in early 2004, Brotherhood of Steel didn't exactly set the world on fire. The Khan brothers then ordered a slap-together sequel for a holiday release in the same year. Things moved so fast that the team got to work before realizing Brotherhood of Steel didn't sell many copies, so in the end, they canned that sequel as well. All these desperate acts to stay relevant and solvent boiled down to a lack of confident leadership. You can't lead a fleet by sinking all of its remaining ships.
Well, there's a lot of things that I would have done differently, and I made my mistakes, but in the end, it was not fun. I hated to be there. It was miserable. This constant string of accountants, lawyers, investors, nothing fun about it. No time for making games. At the time, if I had had such an opportunity, I would have fired everyone in the company except for Black Isle Studios and kept 40 people, and everything would still go on. I would rebuild Interplay from there, but nobody would allow me to do that.
By 2004, Interplay had canceled as many Fallout games as they had released. A sad state of affairs. What might be strange to people looking in at Black Isle Studios is, aside from Fallout, few of Black Isle's other titles seem to gain enough traction to see the light of day. And if they did, they didn't enjoy nearly the same recognition and success as Baldur's Gate, although BioWare definitely and deservedly did. Icewind Dale sold well enough, but shot for a target audience that were willing to accept a lesser version of Baldur's Gate. All of these titles were a reminder that we never seemed able to get on our feet to develop a strong title or engine of our own. Interplay kept requesting we turn out Icewind Dale-style games faster and faster to try and keep the company's head above water, but eventually that wasn't enough. For Van Buren, Chris Avallone and his team penned dozens of design documents, concept art, and a fully fleshed out world, even down to specific quest triggers, choices, dialogue options, and multiple endings. And there was also a system explored during the pen and paper playtest sessions, an AI-controlled rival party. Avalon ran 2 separate tabletop groups and didn't tell them that they were participating in the same connected world and that their actions affected the other group. In the computer game, these characters would roam the wasteland, altering the world around you and creating the sense of a living environment. You would see occasional hints and cutaways to their activities, and you would feel the consequences of their actions should you witness the aftermath of their visit to an area or faction before you got a chance to. Van Buren was going to end with the player's choice of which locations to nuke while controlling the ballistic orbital missile base. The finale would have shown your choice and consequences in mushroom cloud form, transforming the world into a new wasteland with the power scales tipped in your favor. As nuclear blasts sprawled over the landscape, we were intended to hear "I don't want to set the world on fire" in the background, just like the original game intended to feature in its intro. In 2004, the Cain brothers abandoned Titus Interactive as an entity, filing for bankruptcy, instead opting to consolidate their crumbling venture under the banner of Interplay, which had much better branding and reputation, despite its financial troubles. To his horror, after Brian Fargo left Interplay, he discovered that the company hadn't been paying back its creditors. Fargo worked with them and led the charge against Interplay with a winding up order to make sure these vendors and associates got paid, even if that meant liquidating his former company. In a strange twist of events, this forced the new heads of Interplay, the Cain brothers, to sell off assets to make up the money they owed. The end result? Interplay put their golden goose, the rights to Fallout sequels, up for auction in a sort of unofficial bidding process for an exclusive licensing agreement to make a Fallout sequel.
We made a list when we were back doing the Elder Scrolls Online, right before we got Fallout, of here are the things that we would like to do one day. Post-apocalyptic was at the top of it. You think of Fallout, but at the time you don't think, okay, that's not something, it's not ours, we can't work on it. Good tidbit, because we're not going to do it. We have Fallout. I made a logo for a series called Apocalypse Road. It had this beat phonetically like the Elder Scrolls, Apocalypse Road. Made a great logo too, with this road sign just said Apocalypse with the RD. And we had someone knew the folks at Interplay and said, well, you really want that to be Fallout? Well, yeah, but, well, I think we might be able to get that. Would you want that? Absolutely, a million times. And then maybe it was a year later, okay, we have the rights to Fallout. It's like one of those things where you're like, where else does that happen? You say, I really want to, this would be, our next dream thing.
Bethesda offered an undisclosed sum, then Hervé Cain approached Troika Games, the studio founded by 3 of Fallout's original creators, asking if they wanted to bid on the game. Troika, after a 4-year development of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines and a rocky launch, wasn't in the financial position to compete with a company riding off the success of the Elder Scrolls. Ironically, both studios had been independently working on concepts for a Fallout-inspired game. Troika was developing an engine prototype for a game called Epic, and Bethesda was in early pre-production for a game called Apocalypse Road. Had Troika got back their most beloved franchise, it could have been the boon they needed to finally turn things around.
I remember contacting a friend who had venture capitalists who told me he could guarantee a certain amount of money. And I thought we bid that. Leonard Boyarsky says he remembers us saying we were going to bid, but we didn't actually have the money set up. Either way, Interplay took that, told Bethesda, hey, there's another bid. I don't know if they told them who it was from. I wasn't there. I don't think they did. Bethesda upped their bid to something higher than we could afford, and the rest is history. Bethesda got the Fallout license.
Bethesda paid $1.175 million as a minimum advance payment against future royalties, meaning if the game sold well enough, they would owe more money to Interplay, and if Bethesda took the option to make Fallout 4 and/or Fallout 5, they would have to pay a similar fee for each game. It certainly seemed, to Tim Cain and Leonard Boyarsky at least, that Hervé Cain teased them with the Fallout license simply to squeeze more money out of Bethesda.
We're extremely excited about this opportunity and what it means both for Bethesda and for Fallout fans around the world. Fallout is one of the great RPG franchises. Millions of Fallout games have been sold worldwide, and fans have been eagerly awaiting the release of a Fallout 3 title.
The 2004 public filing revealed the extent of Interplay's decline, with the company forced out of its 81,000 square foot Irvine offices due to unpaid rent and owing $1.1 million in back wages and taxes. So it seemed like fate that they sold the Fallout license to Bethesda. But nearly every dollar of that deal immediately went into keeping this drowning company afloat.
To be perfectly honest, I was extremely disappointed that we did not get the chance to make the next Fallout game. This has nothing to do with Bethesda. It's just that we've always felt that Fallout was ours, and it was just a technicality that Interplay happened to own it. It sort of felt as if our child had been sold to the highest bidder, and we had to just sit by and watch. Since I have absolutely no idea what their plans are, I can't comment on whether I think they're going in the right direction with it or not.
Further monetizing the franchise that they had abandoned years ago, Interplay sold a license to a tabletop developer to make a pen and paper version of Fallout in 2006. But here's the thing about exclusive licensing agreements. They're exclusive. Bethesda threatened legal action in 2007 upon learning about it, and so the original creators had to rewrite and redo a lot of their artwork to not infringe on Bethesda's rights, renaming it from Fallout to Exodus. Bethesda again put the squeeze on Interplay when they started selling Fallout 1, 2, and Tactics as the Fallout trilogy, implying customers were getting Fallout 3, which they had no right to sell. Around this time, Bethesda became very confident that they had a hit on their hands, and so went back to the bargaining table with Interplay to secure this franchise's future. According to Hervé Kahn, he wanted to sell the entire Fallout IP, all rights and sequels, both online and single player, not just the license Bethesda already had, for a whopping $50 million. But Bethesda counteroffered $5.75 million, saying they had no intention of doing an online multiplayer version of the game. The two parties agreed and they inked the deal. So while Bethesda was now the official owner of the Fallout IP, Interplay kept the rights to the classic games and a future MMO. This was a trademark license agreement. And if you're familiar with copyright law, you can imagine how ugly this got later on.
Internally, we're a bunch of Fallout geeks. There's nobody here who hasn't played that game and enjoyed it. But it's definitely different, because it's not really considered ours, the franchise. We didn't start it. They did great stuff for which I will always have tremendous respect. But at the same time, if we're going to move forward, we're really going to have to move forward. As Fallout fans and guys who make role-playing games and have for over a decade, we have pretty good ideas about what we want to do and how to do it.
Fallout 3 launched in late 2008 after a heavy marketing campaign full of creative and expensive live-action videos, trailers, and Vault Boy animations. But they weren't marketing to the CRPG crowd. They were going after Halo, Call of Duty, and Elder Scrolls players. They sold Fallout to the masses, not hardcore fans. They even dressed up Washington, D.C., the game's new setting, with banners, museum-like displays, and video screens promoting the new game. Fallout had never had this kind of high profile or dollars behind it. Powered by a compelling setting they bought and a striking aesthetic, the game launched on both PC and console for the very first time. So it's no surprise that the game blew previous sales numbers out of the water. Bethesda's Fallout was essentially the Elder Scrolls formula. They had proven successful 4 times already, with a story and setting remixed from Interplay's first 2 titles. Its intro zooms from retro 1950s style electronics out to the desolate post-nuke world, accompanied by the sound of the ink spots. A vault dweller leaves the shelter they've known their whole life to pursue an important task. The Enclave is the main antagonist. The MacGuffin is the Garden of Eden creation kit. The open-world wasteland was based on real-life topography and landmarks near the game devs' offices. It was a sincere attempt to recreate the magic of the original Fallout games, repackaged to appeal to the masses. And we ate it up. While Bethesda would have developed Apocalypse Road whether or not they acquired the license to Fallout, as their track record has shown, their first new IP in over 25 years, led by the same staff who made Fallout 3, was less than stellar. Meanwhile, with cash from Bethesda's purchase of the Fallout IP, a somewhat revitalized Interplay lured back some of Fallout's original team to work on Fallout Online. This included lead designer Chris Taylor, creator of the Special System, Jason Anderson, lead technical artist on the original game, and Marco Green as lead writer, who wrote much of Fallout 1 and 2's dialogue and created the game's beloved talking heads. Jason Anderson worked on the game internally for 2 years, but became increasingly frustrated by Bethesda stonewalling him whenever he submitted design documents for approval, as per the contractual obligation.
It was impossible to get anything approved through Bethesda. It became very clear to me that Bethesda had no intention of ever allowing Interplay to actually create an MMO.
In 2009, Jason left the project, and Bethesda tried to pull the plug on Interplay's MMO, claiming that Interplay was insolvent and didn't have the funds to make the game. But the judge ruled in favor of Interplay, so they resumed development. Interplay officially announced Fallout Online on their website in 2010, along with a teaser trailer and sign up for a future beta test. Details were scarce, but the news that got fans excited was the return of classic elements from the original Fallout games, namely the Master from Fallout 1. But the trademark license agreement that Fallout Online fell under came with strict conditions. Among them, Interplay had to secure a hefty $30 million in funding by April 2009 and launch within 4 years of full development. Another stipulation was that the game needed to meet Bethesda's quality standards, and Interplay would pay 12% of net revenue back to Bethesda. It was a daunting task, especially for a company on the brink of financial collapse. Bulgarian game developer Masthead Studios offered to partner with Interplay in 2009 for a share of future profits, just as the deadline approached in which Interplay had to enter full development. Masthead built an early 3D prototype, and Hervé Khan flew out to Bulgaria to see it in person. He recorded under 2 minutes of gameplay footage as proof the project was underway. But this partnership only brought more problems to the doomed project. For starters, Bethesda, knowing Interplay didn't have close to $30 million in funding, was going to pull the plug anyway. But when they heard Interplay was sublicensing game dev to an outside company, the legal team not only sprung onto Interplay, but also went after Masthead too. Interplay, refusing to back down, countersued, asserting they still owned the Fallout franchise. They argued the trademark license agreement, allowing Interplay the right to build an MMO, was so vaguely worded that it couldn't be enforced. Therefore, they argued the asset purchase agreement, which granted the Fallout IP to Bethesda, was invalid as well. In other words, you break it, you unbought it. Interplay overestimated their budget to comply with the contract by combining a $15 million funding agreement with one company and a purported $20 million worth of services and technology through Masthead, not actual cash on hand. Then, the fight got dirtier. Whether through a major oversight in the 2007 contract or through shrewd attorney insight in 2011, Bethesda's legal team asserted that Interplay's license only allowed them to create a Fallout game in name only. That meant that Fallout Online had to be stripped of all the series' iconic elements, like Vault Boy, Super Mutants, and Power Armor. Patently ludicrous. But technically, the wording only covered the Fallout trademark or branding, not the copyrighted Fallout IP. Coming from the company that sued Mojang for daring to use the title Scrolls as infringement of the Elder Scrolls, this was the scummiest of moves. The courtroom became a battleground for competing interpretations of complex legal agreements. The case dragged on, with both sides presenting evidence and expert testimony. The definition of full-scale development became a contentious point. On one hand, Bethesda had every reason to suspect Interplay wasn't nearly as far along and funded as they claimed. On the other, Interplay was being done dirty as well. Their team had written a 2,000-page game development wiki based on a license they found out was completely useless. Before the trial could reach a verdict, the parties settled. Interplay, facing an uphill battle, agreed to walk away with a $2 million payout. But the cost was steep, revoking their license to develop Fallout Online, which handed Bethesda complete ownership of the Fallout universe, and Interplay would lose the right to sell classic Fallout games as of 2013. After the initial licensing fee, the IP buyout, then the 2011 settlement, Bethesda paid more than they were expecting to. Even so, they essentially bought the game franchise for about $9 million instead of $50 million, the original asking price. Considering the over 50 million copies of Fallout sold today, and the millions of dollars of royalties they evaded by buying instead of licensing the franchise, it was a bargain. The following year, Interplay, now without the Fallout IP, tried to relaunch their game project with no copyright infringements or co-development with other studios, essentially starting from scratch. In desperation, they briefly revived the Black Isle Studios brand. To be fair, they did bring on a few former staff from Interplay and Black Isle, though it felt like a bit of a charade considering the studio's unceremonious closure nearly a decade prior. As it had been since 2004, the studio was still mostly broke, so they released a crowdfunding video filled with dated 2012 Mayan apocalypse references and comedy skits. Chris Taylor, Marco Green, and other devs promoted this new attempt to build a post-apocalyptic single-player game. As part of a running gag, they intentionally bleeped out any references to Fallout as a cheeky way to highlight that they didn't have the IP anymore.
Wait, I can say fuck, but I can't say fuck. Exactly.
The campaign was unsuccessful, purportedly only raising a few $1,000s, and the team disbanded shortly after. This is a tough one. As much as this zombified husk of Interplay made every poor business decision you could hope to make, the Fallout veterans that came back to work on these revival projects had a genuine passion for the universe and the games. And this was in 2012, the same year Kickstarter became an avenue for classic video game studio revivals, like Tim Schafer's Broken Age and Brian Fargo's long-awaited Wasteland 2. People were willing to throw millions of dollars at spiritual successors with a compelling pitch.
This style of game, the isometric role-playing game, whether you're controlling a single character or a party of characters, the fans never left that style of game. Publishers left that style of game. And it was a very frustrating thing to have publishers tell us that no one wants these games when we have a huge audience of fans. 1 million units seems like nothing, but like if the budget is small and the team is small, you can make a really awesome game that you have a very passionate fan base that's willing to play it.
And these sorts of franchise-destroying decisions didn't stop in the 2000s. Conglomerates like EA, Embracer Group, and now Microsoft have made a business model of driving great studios and game franchises into the ground. Bullfrog, Westwood, Origin, Visceral, the Deus Ex franchise, Volition, Free Radical Design, Tango Gameworks, Arcane Austin, Black Box, Pandemic. The list goes on. It's not a new problem, but their scars still sting for years. Thousands of unemployed, incredible games canceled or cut short, and brilliant studios mired in the sludge of publisher bloat, unfathomable expectations, and poor business decisions. Bethesda's evolution of the Fallout series had a ton of work put into translating the foundation set by previous games into their own engine and gameplay style. But a lot of old-school Fallout fans rejected Fallout 3, including the original Fallout forums such as No Mutants Allowed. It didn't live up to the tone and design philosophy that attracted people to the setting in the first place. So it's no surprise that when several ex-Black Isle Studios veterans were given the chance to prove themselves, they made something truly special in Fallout New Vegas, under extraordinarily limited circumstances. The general audience may prefer the graphic fidelity, crafting, and gunplay of Fallout 4, but few really care for the story or setting, especially when contrasted with the brutal and evocative factions fighting for the Mojave. Over the years, many designers, writers, and artists who made significant contributions to Fallout have been overshadowed, their work rushed, their games canceled, and their names omitted from the credits of derivative works. And why is that? Movies and TV shows credit their sources, acknowledge the original creators, and even put the book authors into the opening credits. What's so different about interactive experiences? It probably boils down to Hollywood and television having more lawyers, agents, and established standards for recognizing creators and the franchises they're attached to. No, Todd Howard didn't create Fallout, nor did he create the Elder Scrolls. He led projects that iterated on others' ideas, writing, and art direction, and turned them into profitable, mainstream games. That's a respectable job, but it's not the only one that matters. I hope you found this little excursion through the dirty business of Fallout's game development enjoyable, or at least an intriguing train wreck. I want to thank Awesomely Amazing, Dr. Martin C. Wolf, and Maktoum Al Maktoum for their tremendous support. Please consider supporting my work on Patreon or YouTube membership. And as always, this has been Indigo Gaming. Thank you for watching.